welcome to your next lesson on the Nato social media user online course provided by the Nato ACT Innovation Hub. My name is Kristina Sokupova and I will be your guide for today's topic, which is the security aspects of the use of social media. Allow me to dive into the topic straight away because we have quite a lot to cover today. So this is what we're going to do. First, I'm going to give you a general introduction into the issues. And then I have divided the lecture into two main areas. The first area is threats to secured networks. In other words, the reasons why our IT departments get slightly nervous when we try to log into our social media accounts from our work devices. And the main area of today's lecture is about the human threat. In other words, when we become our own security threat, when we become our own vulnerability by the way we act online. Towards the end of the lecture, I will cover a few remedies to our behaviors, but these remedies will be covered more by my colleague J.R. Palm in the following lecture. So, when I thought of putting together the lecture for a military audience about social media, I thought the best way to start and to explain social media is through operations, because social media is just like any operation where we need to think of our code of conduct, and we need to make sure that our enemy does not possess information about ourselves, about friendly allies, but also, as it becomes more apparent these days, about individual soldiers and their families. So why is it that social media are such a big challenge for military organizations? Well, there are, in my opinion, 6 main reasons. The first and most obvious is that social media run on networks. They're not hierarchies, so there is no chain of command. You can't order somebody on social media to behave in a certain way like you can in military organizations which are hierarchical. Another very closely connected is that it's a new and dynamically evolving environment which is driven by the users. Again, something that military organizations are not used to, where the chain of command pretty much defines how the organization behaves. And therefore, we cannot control social media, and that's something that many people very often forget, that social media cannot be controlled by higher powers. Another very important aspect, which is very often overlooked or misunderstood, is that social media are not digital newspapers. And we see this very often when defense organizations approach social media. They use them just like digital newspapers for posting information. They think of social media as a one-way channel where they post pictures without actually willing to engage with the audience, which is one of the most important aspects of social media, that it's dynamic. Another issue that we see is that the private and official use very often blur, and this is not just a challenge for the military, but also for companies. When individuals post comments about policies, and for soldiers, be it foreign policies or security policies, and it's very difficult to make a distinction when they're talking in their own private voice and when they talk on behalf of the organization. Because when we accept the principle that every soldier is a messenger, this issue gets even more complicated. We think of social media, especially in the light of the most recent developments in Eastern Europe as well as in the Middle East as an operational environment. It's extremely useful for psychological operations, and it became absolutely paramount for intelligence gathering, precisely because individual soldiers and individuals engage in the use of social media, but at the same time they can become the vulnerability of the system. When we talk about security in pure military terms, there are two things that need to be defined, and that's who is the enemy that we're protecting against, and what's the perimeter or the asset that we're protecting. Well, the problem with social media, there is neither, and neither is well defined. There is no perimeter to secure, and the enemy is not defined. And I will talk about the definition of enemy slightly later. Just to add to the complexity of social media for defense organizations, we need to think in terms of three different levels of security concerns. Obviously, there is the personal level, when we think of the privacy of our soldiers, of our defense personnel. We think about their financial security in terms of credit cards and things like that. Then we also think about, or we need to be concerned about, organizational security, which is very often closely connected to operational security, information leaks, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we need to be concerned about national security, because if every soldier is a messenger, then every soldier has the capacity to somehow influence national policy by saying something either good or wrong on social media. This concept is not new, and we've known this since the beginning of times. And there is an old English saying that words can sink ships. Well, this is extremely acute, especially in digital age, when we share information in real time and we share it globally. So it's not that you say something wrong in a pub and it takes 2 weeks for it to spread around. The spread is immediate. So let's talk about the threats to secure networks. In other words, the traditional threats or cyber threats that I use the phrase when bad guys use technology to steal or interrupt or compromise our IT systems. The term or the phrase bad guys is intentional. As I said, we can't really define enemy when it comes to social media, because the perpetrators can be anyone from a attention-seeking teenager to a hacktivist, as we usually use the term for activists who have hacking capabilities. We can also stand against financially motivated criminal organizations or state-sponsored organizations. Or we can face a combination of all of the above. So it's not it's not clear who is the enemy. It's basically all these groups of people that we need to be aware of. What we're really standing against is malware when it comes to threats to secure networks. Malware is a word that we come up with, and it's a combination of malicious software words. In other words, it's the evil software that gets into your computer and does stuff to it. We have different terms for it. It can be a virus, it can be a Trojan, it can be a worm, you name it. It doesn't really matter how we term it. What you need to sort of embrace is that there is malware, and is the bad sort of software that takes over your computer, steals your information, compromises the information on the computer or on the network, depending how you're connected, puts advertisement on your computer, and so on and so forth. So it's the bad stuff that we need to There is an old saying, an old truth, that we should never underestimate our enemies, so we should never underestimate the bad guys. They're in it for money or for some kind of a gain, be it political gain or strategic gain. We know that the bad guys monitor what we do on the internet, and they place their malware accordingly. So they're maximizing their effectiveness, minimizing their risks and costs. This is a graph that I got from a Cisco report for 2013. I know that the numbers at the moment are different, and I know that the social media use has since more than doubled. But it gives you a good picture about how we spend time online, and therefore malware is then put into the segments that we use the most because, again, the bad guys need to maximize their effectiveness. Another very important question is, and this has been circulating the debates and the discourse for quite some time, whether social media actually pose new threats. Well, no. The threat as such is not new. It's the old same tricks that have been around the internet since ever the internet was around. What is new is that social media allow for malware to be distributed to much broader audience in much more effective ways. And in that sense, we need to understand, and this is something that is not quite well known, is that most commonly this evil software is downloaded from legitimate websites or delivered via spam or phishing. But it's the legitimate website that we need to actually be aware of, because while statistics on this matter differ, we know for sure that it's more than a half of all the malware downloaded. It's downloaded from legitimate websites like your search engines, like your normal Facebook page. Anything that hosts a third-party advertisements is a potential risk. And I love this piece of statistics, which is quite interesting, is that in 2003, online advertisements that we clicked on were 182 times more likely to deliver malicious software than pornography site, which gives the whole idea of safe online sex a completely different meaning. Another development that we saw in 2003 was a major shift, again, in our behavior, that we moved from desktops to mobile phones or mobile devices, iPods, iPads, and so forth. We know that in 2014, actually more people in the US and in the UK use their smartphones to browse internet or to use social media than they use their home computers or work computers, for that matter. This is a short graphic that shows how much time we spend online using the different corners of the internet. While this is based on data from the United Kingdom, and the data will differ in terms of the percentages, depending on culture, depending on how available mobile infrastructure is, how expensive it is to browse the internet. What is important is that we do spend at least 1/3 of all the time we spend online socially networking. To me, what was also extremely interesting was that in the UK, people in December 2013 spent 42 hours online via their smartphones. That's a whole working week combined in 1 month. Obviously, if we go back to the principle that the bad guys place malware where we behave the most, this changed the way they placed malware in 2013. And we saw almost 2,500% increase in malware for Android devices. What is even more striking that only about 50% of people who have smartphones have any sort of security solution on their device. What I could not even put down on the slide was the fact that the other half does not even know that there is a security solution available for their phone, which is just plain scary. So what are these threats? Most commonly, the malware delivered to our phones is interested in tracking. They use the information that we have on our smartphones or our mobile devices. All mobile devices have a GPS, they have cameras, and so on and so forth. We store information about our credit cards. So more than 30% of all the malware delivered to these devices somehow used and collected information from these features. What I also need to say here is that it's not that the bad guys install this malware into our devices to use it themselves. There's a whole black market out there. They usually collect it and then they sell it to the highest bidder, which makes it even more difficult for us to actually say who the enemy is and where the information goes to. Which brings me to the main bit of my lecture, and that's when the human threat, and that is when the social in the social media is both its biggest value as well as its biggest vulnerability. We're only humans and humans err, but sometimes we can actually pose such huge threats, not to just to ourselves, but especially when it comes to military, to whole organizations and nations. We know that most recently, 91% of all the attacks that we have recorded online somehow leveraged social tactics. In other words, it's not the technology. It's, you can have the best antivirus software on your computer, but it is how you use the computer or your phone that matters. It's the behavior, not the technology, that's the problem. Well, the first one is the most elementary one, and that's password. And yes, we've been talking about strong passwords forever. And IT departments are especially vicious when they come to password policies. At the same time, again, going back to statistics, we know that 76% of attacks somehow used weak or stolen credentials. 1, 2, 3, 4 is not a password. A, B, C, D is not a password. Your pet's name can be a password, but then, don't say it to anyone. And I'm saying this because we know that one quarter of social media users share their passwords with their friends and family. And this is not just that I tell my friend that my password is so-and-so, log into my Facebook account. It's them sharing it online with strangers or with apparent friends who can be fraudsters. Which, again, it's a scary statistics. It's 25% is a lot. Another issue is, what is it that we share? For military personnel, obviously it boils down to operational security. It's, you are all briefed on operational security, on especially when you have some sort of security clearance. You know exactly what you can say and what you cannot say in the real world. It's only about applying these rules to the digital world. Sometimes we forget. But there is an additional thing to it. It's not just about OPSEC, but it's also about the digital footprint that we leave. It's about the aggregate public information that we share with everyone. I have a little example here. So we have Tommy Joe here, who has a Facebook account. On his Facebook account, he places benign data like that he likes Arsenal, that he's friends with Jane, John, and Jimmy, that he lives in London, and obviously, as we all do, he posts pictures of his wife and children. Then he gets a phone call from somebody and says, listen, there's this thing called LinkedIn. It's really good for your professional career. You need to be on it, because if you're not on LinkedIn, then you're nobody. So he establishes a LinkedIn profile, and obviously he goes through the features of LinkedIn and puts his CV on, and he reveals the fact that he's a Navy cryptologist. And obviously there is a little section that says certificates, so he puts in that he holds a Nato top secret clearance, which is extremely valuable asset, especially when you leave the military sector into the commercial sector, when you need to work on, say, R&D projects. Well, little Tommy Doe has a Twitter account where he tweets, again, benign stuff about the newest developments in cyber, cryptology, and so on and so forth. But then he also has a Foursquare, and it just popped out that he became a mayor of this Grease Spoon pub, which is around the corner from where he lives. All these things together create a pretty much a holistic picture about what Tommy does and who he is. And this information makes Tommy not only a valuable target for terrorists, but also it makes a valuable target for criminals because he posts pictures of his wife and his children. Therefore, there is a possibility that they may get kidnapped, and then he would be blackmailed, and so on and so forth. So don't think that your online life or your virtual life on social media is in separate boxes that are not integrated. They're integrated, and whoever Googles you gets the whole picture. Also, don't think that your virtual life is separate from your real life, especially when you use applications like Foursquare, which pin you to a certain location at a certain time. We can't think that our virtual existence is completely separate from our real existence. It's, in my opinion, in the 21st century already impossible. Another issue is who do we share stuff with? In other words, in the military terms, is the classical IFF, identification friend or foe. I'm not quite sure whether the whole raise how many friends on Facebook you have, the better person you are, is still on. It definitely is with teenagers. People just add random strangers because it raises their profile. A lot of these people are fraudsters. Again, they're using information about you to somehow make money. If it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. There's a whole black market in stolen identities. And there's also something as the malware-generated social media accounts. When we're talking about stolen identities, again, just to give you an idea how big of a problem this is, Facebook themselves estimate that monthly they have about 50 to 100 million users, which are either duplicates or malware generated, and 40 million of registered monthly active users, in other words, users that log in at least once a month, which are undesirable. In other words, these are the spammers and stalkers of the world. Which, this, again, it's a huge number. To give you a concrete example from the security sector, probably the most famous case is Admiral Stavridis' fake Facebook account, which was tracked down in 2012. But before it was closed down, this fake account actually friended quite a number of top military officials And while it has never been released, what kind of information was shared? We know that there was some sort of a flow of quite a sensitive information going to the fake account because people thought that genuinely they are talking to Admiral Stavridis. The same thing happened in 2010 with Interpol security chief Ronald Noble, who actually ended up having 2 Facebook accounts. And at that time, the perpetrators actually managed to get sensitive data about ongoing Interpol's investigations. To bring it home a little bit more, I wanted to share an email that I got through LinkedIn myself 2 weeks ago from Donald Hoffman. I got a request to connect, so I checked very fast, that he's an assistant of NATO conflict resolution at NATO ACT. And I thought, okay, NATO ACT, I work with NATO ACT, that's fine, it's a good connection. So I accepted. And then I got a message asking me for my marital status in a very bad English. Immediately, that account got blocked and reported. But that's just to show that, it really does get personal, and it is real. And what's even scarier is that the perpetrators use something that we term social engineering. In other words, somebody must have gone into my LinkedIn profile and see that I am working with NATO ACT, and they target it. Because they thought that I would be more likely to actually share data with somebody who was working for the same organization. It usually is a sophisticated multi-step process. It's not just somebody clicking on things and then sending a simple email. And what's even scarier that very often, especially when if you are a high-value target, this is coupled with real-life actions. In other words, people review your tweets. They find out that you've been to professional training somewhere last week. Then you get an email asking you to evaluate the quality of the training. And if you don't reply, then a nice lady calls you up and asks you, well, sir, we have noticed that you haven't replied to our email. Could you please do the review? Very often people fall for this because social media provide a fake feeling of intimacy, that you think that you really know the people. And B, when somebody calls you up and they're very polite, you're not going to hang up on them. You're also very polite. It's in our nature. And you think that if somebody verifies by phone call, excuse me, then it's okay. But again, be aware that that something like that can happen. In other words, what I'm saying is that the bad guys know you. And it's not just about the aggregate public information that you put up about yourself. It's also the social valence, that they Google you, they see what you're doing, they see where you're going, and so on and so forth. But also, there is something like the data collection via Google, Facebook, and other third-party applications. In other words, have you ever noticed that when you Google new tennis shoes, that for the next 2 weeks you're going to get advertisements about cheapest tennis shoes in town and sports shop there and sports shop here? Google also collects data about your searches. It collects data about your location. So when you fire up your laptop in a different city, it gives you tourist places to visit because it actually figure out that you're connecting from a different IP. So these things are there. Be aware that you are being followed all the time. There's a scary bit to it as well, and that there are automated data correlation applications which are available to anyone. In other words, what Google does with tracking you down and figuring out your network, you can buy for couple $100 and do it yourself. In other words, anybody can buy it and do it themselves. And this is a picture, this is a screenshot what some of these applications look like. This is, I think this is Maltigo, when they analyze your network, and they can actually draw out your strongest connections, and therefore, they can figure out that yes, you have 10 family members, but you're really only communicating with 3 of them. Therefore, these are your closest connections, and so on and so forth. So they can pretty much map the dynamics of your network and on of your online presence. Another trap that people really fall for is geotagging in applications. Geotagging is something that is pretty much a feature that we live with at the moment. Many of applications that we have in our phones will not even work unless we turn geotagging on. Well, geotagging is extremely dangerous, especially for soldiers on missions. But again, we're all humans. It's about remembering to either leave your phone behind or just turning the geotagging feature off when you are going into secured areas or you're on a mission, because then everybody can tag you. Most recently, there is this thing that emerged, and that's people tend to thrive in their physical fitness and their healthy lifestyle and so on and so forth. So we have gadgets, we have devices that help us be better, faster, and slimmer. The different names for the different brands, be it Fuel Band by Nike or Fitbit by somebody else. What it does is it gives you have a little band that measures anything from your temperature to your heartbeat to, and because many of them have a GPS tracker, it measures your movement. So if you're a couch potato, it will scream at you that you're a couch potato, that you have not done your steps for the day, and so on and so forth. And then you synchronize it with the application which is online. Well, the question really is, where does this data go? And it's, you set up an account, so it has your name, it has your date of birth. Now they know, your heartbeat, they know where you're going, how fast you're going. Well, who owns the data? Is it you, or is this data being leaked to somebody else? Yes, on one hand, you can say, well, I use tracking because I can get a better insurance deal because I'm a safe driver. At the same time, if you use these wristbands, yes, you can improve your physical fitness, and you'll be slimmer and leaner. But if you're not, then the data can be sold to an insurance company, which will decrease your premium because of your unhealthy lifestyle. So these are the things that we very often forget when we give permission to different applications and when we share online, that not only there are the benefits, but there are also the security risks. Another very typical one is that when we actually go out running, many people share a map of their usual run online. Well, not only that you can boast of that you're faster and then that you've run so many kilometers a day. At the same time, you're basically showing to the rest of the world that every Monday at 9 o'clock in the evening, you're running through this abandoned place in the park with a very expensive phone in your pocket. So just be aware, we're all natures of habit. And be aware that by showing something, by boasting off, there's also a security risk. Picture posting in the era of facial recognition. On the one hand, we're extremely careful about posting pictures of soldiers from missions. The rules are that the faces need to be blurred precisely because of facial recognition software. At the same time, we're very reckless when it comes to pictures from parties and different social events. There is the risk of you posting a picture when you're completely wasted and your boss may see it. B, there is the picture of you not posting the picture, but somebody from your friends posting the picture, and you still can be recognized. So the question of responsibility is really, really extended here. It's not just you not posting things, but also your friends and family knowing that there are certain things that they cannot post about you, because then you can be easily tracked. A very famous example from this, in July 2009, the wife of the chief of the British Secret Services, MI6, nobody knows what she was thinking, but she posted pictures revealing her and her family and her husband in weird positions. She posted family details, and she posted to a group called London, which at that time had approximately 200 million people in it. So it's pretty much, you know, she posted pictures to the rest of the world. That's the headline from the newspapers at that time. That's the wife with, I believe, that's their daughter doing some sort of a chair dance. And this is a very, in my opinion, unflattering picture of the, at that time, MI6 chief. No matter what you do, this is not a picture that you would want to have on your Facebook anyway. The issue of free speech for soldiers, or any military personnel for that matter, is a tricky one. Again, when we talk about OPSEC, you know what you are allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. I think what it boils down to is realizing that commenting stuff on social media is not like chatting in a pub. And if you think it is like chatting in a pub, then think of pub full of spies. Everything online gets recorded. Even if you delete it, the minute you post it, somebody can take a screenshot and save it for later. The minute you post a picture, somebody can download it and save it for later. So there is no deletion on social media. The minute you post it, you completely lose control of what's happening with it. Again, think OPSEC. It's, it's old rules, new environment. Again, I have an example on this evolving issue. In 2002, U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant was given an other than honorable discharge from the armed forces because he criticized the actions of Barack Obama on his Facebook account. Despite the fact that he said that these are his personal views, he was kicked out with no honors. Because I think at that time he said that he would not follow an illegal order, which was taken as against the military ethic and the rules. This is something that's evolving. It's good. We will probably see more cases of this when free speech for soldiers is going to be discussed, and I can assume that every nation will take their own stand towards it. So, since I've given you all these horrific statistics, and you are probably just about to sort of flush your mobile devices and crash your computers. So, what is it that we need to do in order to stay safe? The natural thing for any military organization or any public administration in general would be, well, in terms of secure networks, well, let's do annual IT training to give them an overview of what's going on. And for social media, well, let's do restrictive social media policies. Well, I can tell you that neither one of them works, because your annual training doesn't solve anything. The environment is so dynamic that what I told you today is probably not going to be valid tomorrow. And restrictive policies don't work, because then you only force the people to go underground, use fake names, and it's counterproductive. So the main advice is use common sense and take responsibility. Use common sense. Again, we're going back to OPSEC. You've been all briefed on operational security. Just apply it to different different environment. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't. Take responsibility again, and that's something that, not only about you posting stuff, but also your friends and your family. Make sure that you only friend the people that you know, so that you can prevent disasters. Again, these are the promised bullet points for remedies. My colleague JR will actually delve into these in much more detail. So, secure and back up your devices. Antivirus software is not really that expensive. Use it on your mobile devices as well. That's important. Think before you click. When you download application, actually go through the list, what you're actually allowing it to do, because sometimes it actually does say, I am going to track all the movement that you have, and I'm going to use all your videos. So read it. If it does have something like that, just don't download it. Know the rules. Check for the rules of your organizations. Many organizations still don't have social media rules. They're working on it. Make sure that you know if there are rules, that you follow them. Google yourself. That's one of the safest ways of actually finding out, at least once a month, Google yourself to see whether you are the only owner of your identity online, that there are no other Facebook or Twitter accounts with your name spamming your friends. Use strong passwords or password managers. Again, password managers is something that my colleague will give you a thorough briefing on. Check your social media account setting. There are security settings. We advise people to check them at least once a month, if not once every 2 weeks, because Facebook tends to, when they update, they bring your security settings back to default. Make sure that you post information only to the people that you want it post to. But at the same time, always assume that whatever you post to the rest of the world. The friends that you have today might not be the friends that you have tomorrow. Your account can be hacked, compromised, whatever. Once you put it online, it's gone. You can't control it. So make sure that you remember that. And in the same line, be picture prudent. It's the old saying, don't take your naked pictures, especially when you're wearing parts of your uniform and so on and so forth. And beware of strangers. If you can, verify the identity of the people that you friend and that you communicate online. Don't discuss things with strangers that you just met, or even with friends. Make sure that, whoever you're communicating with, you verify their identity. In conclusion, what I would like to say is that social media do not pose new threats. The threats that we see are endemic to the whole of internet. Social media is just new means of spreading these threats. Obviously, and this is something that I think all NATO personnel is pretty much aware of, that due to the nature of our work, we need to be so much more careful than usual civilian citizens or users. Don't be paranoid, although a little bit of healthy paranoia never killed anyone, but be sensible. Think, use your common sense. There is a rule that we use for civilians. When you post things, we tell them, always think that your grandma can read it or see what you're doing. For military personnel, not only that we can use the grandma rule, but we can also, or we have to also use the uniform rule. In other words, always think that you're wearing your uniform when posting things online, and your grandma is looking at you. And I would like to conclude with a little bit of a Clausewitzian quote that, like in war, There is also fog and friction on social media, but that is not going to prevent us from engaging in social media. I would like to thank you for your attention, and JR and I will be available for a live Q&A session as scheduled, but we're also available for questions and comments via our respective social media accounts or the Innovation Hub portal. Thank you very much for your attention.